Yeah, welcome into the Tuesday edition. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by First Horizon, Big Bank Muscle, Small Bank Hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get it all. Robbie Stanley, Paul Kuharski in for Joe Rexrode today. Nick Keyser with us as well. PK, good morning. What's going on?
Good morning. Happy to be here as always. Hello, Nashville.
Hello, PK. Keyser, how we doing? What's going on?
Hello. Doing good. How are you?
Doing awesome.
Ready for your Masters, right?
Masters coming up. It's a big week. Hopefully the rain will stop down there. But yeah, looking forward to the Masters this weekend. It's going to be awesome.
Jim Nance.
Courtside
last night. Now he's ready to go.
It's a versatile guy, that Jim Nance. Whether it's football, basketball, golf, he's ready to do it. So we'll see.
But disappointed. Can he overcome his disappointment?
Guess we're going to find out. What a game last night for the majority of the game. And a bit of a dud of an ending. Florida, PK, last night did not get their first lead in the game, or excuse me, their first lead in the second half until 46 seconds remaining in the second half. They were trailing the whole time. And then they get their first lead of the second half with 46 seconds left, and they win 65-63. The last two possessions for Houston in the national championship game, they do not get shots off last night. Turnovers by Emmanuel Sharp on both cases there, and Florida wins its third national title in men's basketball. Your thoughts on what we saw last night in the national championship game?
Well, it's never as good, right, when you get a defensive stop on the biggest possession of the game as opposed to an offensive look, even if the offensive look is a miss, right? So Emmanuel Sharp goes up in the air, drops the ball, knows he can't touch it, decides that his best play is to stay away from it and wait prayerfully for a teammate to come and get it. I mean, there's still probably 3 seconds there. Am I wrong? I mean, I know it's a very quick decision, but I think the right thing to do there is to grab it. You know, you get called for it. There's 3 seconds left. It's Florida ball with a 2-point lead. Florida possession, foul, put them on the line, hope they only make one of two, and you've got a chance for a quick 3-pointer to force overtime. Would have been a better scenario than what happened there, which was a mad scramble where Houston didn't have positioning to get back and get that ball. Florida ultimately gets it, ends up on the ground with as the clock expires.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good point.
I didn't think there was much discussion of that scenario there. It was just kind of that game over.
I mean, you're probably in deep trouble either way, but You're right. Like, at that point, the way it worked out, you got to try to extend the game. And it's just a really, Kelvin Sampson, I was watching an interview he did after the game. I mean, you could tell it. He's just shell-shocked after what he saw the last two possessions there. And, it's up. You go up, and if you're Emmanuel Sharp, there's a person right in your face. And, if you let that shot go, that it's just getting sent back the other way. It's just that it was not really a good set. And look, Florida's freakishly athletic. You were talking about it before the show. That's one thing that stands out about these teams. They're both huge and just freakishly athletic, and that's what made Florida so scary heading into this. But you really saw it, I thought, on those last couple of defensive possessions there.
So athletic. And I mean, can't help but. I mean, there's a lot of athleticism in the tournament. There's a lot of athleticism in the sport. That's the direction. I mean, there's still room for. I guess there's still room for a semi-unathletic guy to fit into an athletic team in some way, shape, and form. But, I don't like your chances to be a big role player if you don't have, and you think of some of the big moments. I mean, Florida got a giant shot right along the way with their key guy running away from the basket to the 3-point arc and turning around and heaving up a three. I mean, just some plays that are ridiculous. I thought it was a pretty likable Florida team and a pretty likable Houston team. They're no real villain here.
No.
I guess
Duke got bounced.
Yeah,
so.
Duke was a bit of a villain, but I think it was a lacking tournament in terms of that, and in terms of teams with big team personalities like that.
Yeah,
I think that's part of what's chipping away at the tournament a little bit. It's still very good, but the lack of team identities when you have some teams that have Kentucky completely new faces. I'm the old man yelling at the cloud, I suppose, but you don't build up much of an identity as a team, certainly nationally, compared to how you used to in the good old days.
Well, it's interesting because like I think we've talked about from a fan standpoint, Tennessee probably notwithstanding, because they actually have had some long tenured guys there.
Sure, Ziegler. I mean,
yeah,
had a
like Fulkerson was there forever,
and those guys they feel like they've been there 10 years when you've been there.
Exactly. So, but that they're not really the norm. Like it's hard to have those players that the fan base rallies behind for any length of time now, because if they're really, really good, they're either going to the NBA, or if you're like a lower level team, they're transferring somewhere else and they're going to get, a bigger spotlight somewhere. So it's hard to do that now in sports. I never really thought about it from the standpoint of what you just threw out there of like those days of teams that you just hate. Like most people, if you're not a Duke fan, you probably don't like Duke, but that's more to do with the brand and Krzyzewski and all those guys. But like those teams, I think it's going to be harder to have that moving forward because the guys just aren't around as long as they used to be. They're either going off to the NBA or they're transferring elsewhere. It's hard to keep those teams together.
And it was their key guy as hateable is Cooper Flagg as hateable Duke players?
Well, he's certainly not as hateable as,
Is he Christian Laettner?
He's not JJ Redick.
Yeah.
He's not Christian Laettner.
Seems, when he's playing bingo in that commercial,
not Grayson Allen.
I'm not looking at him with contempt when he's playing bingo in whoever's commercial that is, the way I've looked at Duke guys in the past. I also, Krzyzewski was a guy that added a lot of contempt to Duke for me.
Yeah.
Because I found him just so sanctimonious. And I had a lot of respect for him too, but I also found him sanctimonious, and that element is gone. So I think they've come back to the pack in terms of hateability. So I don't know. There's no UNLVs anymore, are there? Even Kentucky, who, you can hate them because of the unrecognizability and the way they run the program. But
now Cal's gone.
Yeah, Cal's gone. And you can't hate a guy from what he did last year, because last year he was playing somewhere else.
Yeah. Will Richard, 18 points for Florida last night. Walter Clayton Jr., a couple of big plays in that game. He's unbelievable to watch throughout the tournament. And look, Florida gets in here in Nashville and they just roll through the SEC tournament, and they look like they were the best team in the nation heading into the tournament. And I looked at their draw and was like, all right, well, everybody's picking Florida. Like all these people are picking Florida to win. And there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. And I thought there was a chance that UConn might get them in that second weekend. And they almost did. Hurley made it a game there. But credit to Florida for at a couple of different points in this tournament, including last night being down double digits in the game, where it looked like they were going to be out, but they were able to find a way to stick with it, fight back in there, and win. And I just think when you watch them, they were the most athletic team out there. And they're getting a kid next year that's apparently 7'5" that's going to be added into this mix, so that could be interesting. But I just thought from really the SEC tournament on, they clearly look like the best team in America, and now they finished it off last night. So congratulations to the Florida Gators.
And, while I don't understand SEC fans rooting for a fellow SEC team, satisfying for the SEC in that regard to have so many teams in the tournament and have somebody finish it off.
Yeah.
An uninteresting tournament in that it was only the second time with all 4 1 seeds going there. I know there's a lot of argument about Cinderellas. We like them when they win early. We don't like them when they lose late. And I don't need a 9 seed in the Final Four, but it's nice to have a story of somebody that's not a regular or not expected to be there. And when you get Auburn, Florida, Houston, Duke,
straight chalk.
Straight chalk. It doesn't make the bracket game very fun.
I wonder if that's, this was kind of a, Joe's gone through some of the rankings when you look at Ken Palm and all that stuff. Like it's probably, if I had to guess, a one-off from that standpoint of just straight number one seeds and how highly ranked in those rankings those teams were. Like those were clearly the best 4 teams in America. We've talked about, like, is this going to be the thing now with the transfer portal being what it is? Is it harder to generate some of those Cinderella teams? I don't know. Like, there's really only a couple years of data in modern college basketball to look at it at this point. So I don't know if we could say it's a trend yet, but I do wonder if moving forward, because of the portal and NIL and all that stuff, like it's harder for these teams that don't have your typical budgets, for lack of a better word, to put together these Cinderella teams come tournament time. I don't know if we're going to see that moving forward. We certainly saw it this year. It was very difficult for those type of teams to get in the tournament and win.
Even Elite Eight, right?
Yeah,
three
exactly
was as good as it got. So, yeah, we'll see if it goes that direction. But I didn't. Do people still stay up for One Shining Moment? I'm sure.
I did not. I'm sure some do. Like I know Rexrode loves it.
They don't have early morning radio.
Rexrode probably had it blasting courtside, if I had to guess, but I did not.
And he'll come home today and watch it on DVR or whatever version of that he has. With a tear rolling down his cheek.
We'll see you next March, next April. 615-737-1025. Our phone number. PK is with us all program long today. We got a lot of things to get into on the NFL draft and Titans front as well. We'll be joined by Nick Baumgardner from The Athletic at 7 o'clock. Mike Herndon from PaulKuharsky.com will be with us at 8:30. Take your thoughts in the meantime, 615-737-1025. Want to get PK's thoughts on something that Diana Rossini said on our program yesterday. We'll do that coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game.
I just think with all the change, something needs to settle. I get questions all the time about Brian Callahan's future. Is he on the hot seat this year? I have a hard time believing ownership wants to go through another change after so many over the last few seasons. So I think despite the fact that we usually see general managers come in and want to bring their own guys, I think Mike Borgonzi is going to try to make this work with Brian Callahan and hope that they're going to get the best version of the Titans. But I can tell you around the league, the belief in what Mike Borgonzi can bring to Tennessee, just from based on what he knows and has learned on his way up. He's obviously paid his dues. That's being applauded for that hire. So while I think it's hard to hear ownership moving on and letting go and being all in on Rand and, appeared to be all in on Mike Vrabel, and then boom, they're gone, and, Rand's gone and Mike's gone. I think for right now, they feel settled in this setup. We just have to see what it's going to look like.
That's Diana Rossini yesterday on our show. Paul Kuharsky with us today on the program. PK Rossini discussing the Brian Callahan, Mike Borgonzi dynamic there. It says that based on his conversations she's had, they really think they're going to try to make that work. Now, as we know, it's April. So it's easy to say things like that in April. How does the season play out? What does it look like if the Titans are, 4-13 next year? We'll see what happens when we cross that bridge. But what'd you make of what Diana Rossini had to say on the Callahan-Borgonzi front there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's their intention too. But like you said, how does it go? And do they need well, first off, I mean, I think Callahan has a lot to prove. And so how does it go with Callahan proving it? Particularly, how does it go with Callahan shaping Cam Ward, which is what we all think is going to happen now? How does Cam Ward react to Callahan and the offensive staff? What kind of results do they produce with a better offensive line? Conceivably a new receiver in the mix here and all of that. If they see better signs, then I think he'll be in good position. But if they see more that looks like last year, I don't think he'll be in good position, despite the patience, talk and conversation that's gone on and on. And then you've got a temperamental owner, and you don't know what the temperamental owner is going to do. And we've talked about this over and over, how convincing was their sales pitch to her about this. She's faded into the background. Will she stay in the background when she's, in the owner's box at these games, if she's watching more bad football that seems coach related?
Yeah. I think, Rexrode threw it out there yesterday that, and we've talked with you a little bit about this. He feels like it's going to be, it feels at the moment like a little bit less of a hands-on approach from Amy Adams Strunk. Not that she's ever been, Jerry Jones or anything walking around over there. And I'm not even talking from a media standpoint, because we know that that's been lacking, and we've talked about that. But just in terms of the day-to-day stuff, it kind of feels like this is Brinker and Borgonzi's show, and she's sitting back and is going to let them do their thing. Now, then the question becomes, how long does that continue? And as they go through this next season, even if it is with Cam Ward, and with a rookie quarterback, the likelihood is, especially with where their roster is right now, that there's not going to be a whole lot of winning that comes with that next year. Can she sit through that and be patient with what I think is clearly a plan that Brinker and Borgonzi and everybody else have kind of sold her over there of what's going to be required here to build a winning team and an organization moving forward? Can she stick with that? That I think is going to be the big question. But Joe threw it out there. Like he talked yesterday about like detecting, just based on the way that they're operating right now, a change on that front from her. Do you buy into that? And how important is that if that's the case, of her maybe taking more of a step back?
Well, I don't know that he's detecting it from her, because we haven't heard anything
Right.
from her. So are we detecting it from the people that she has empowered to speak on her behalf?
I guess, yeah. I guess that would be the more accurate way to put it.
Yes, but we're detecting it from the people that she's empowered to speak on her behalf. But the people that she's empowered to speak on her behalf are the people who are speaking to her about doing this. So how much weight does that hold? That's the big question.
Right.
They're empowered to speak on her behalf, but they are speaking to her, encouraging her to do this. How much sway do they have with her? So they're speaking to us on her behalf outward, but they're speaking to her kind of on the fans' behalf. And the question is about the communication going inward, not about the communication coming outward.
No, that's a great point.
How powerful is that communication? That's the big question. And so we need to know the answer to that. But the other question is, and this is what I'm most curious about, Brian Callahan had a lot of work to do on himself, and he admitted that. This team was committing a ton of penalties and doing a ton of stupid stuff, and those things are largely related to coach's ability to get through to his team and to convince it to be more self-disciplined and better. And he didn't get through to guys to do that. Now, sometimes guys are going to commit penalties because they're not good enough. Your tackle is going to jump and be flagged because he knows he's about to get beaten by the edge and kill the quarterback, and he feels like jumping at the risk of getting called for a penalty is a better alternative. All right, so they feel like they've got better tackle situation now. Those guys should be less prone to false starting. Are they? We'll find out.
One thing that Callahan talked about at his end of season press conference that I found to be pretty interesting at the time, and we'll see when camp rolls around and as they get into the season, how much of a tangible difference it makes. But, obviously he's the play caller on offense, and he talked about how he's clearly spending a lot of time with the quarterbacks. He's spending a lot of time in the offensive meeting rooms, and as a head coach, probably didn't do the best job of getting into the defensive rooms and getting around the team and making sure that the processes around all of that were going the way that he wanted to. So that all sounds good. Like he wants to fix that moving into next year. I guess my question is, can you adequately fix that while you're still worried about the offense and the time that is required to go into the game planning side, putting a script together for your plays? Like, can you adequately address that the way that he feels like, I guess, he needs to after his first year by doing that? Like that, to me, you're going to have to rely a lot on Nick Holtz and your offensive staff to do that.
Yeah, you have to find a way to distribute it all, right? So if you're taking away a little bit of what you're doing on offense, then you're giving a little bit more of it to Holtz and now Mike McCoy in order to peek in a little bit more on the defense. You only have so much time. Now, a lot of these offensive head coaches who are play callers have very strong defensive coordinators and feel confident in not being over there as much. Sean McVay, when he started, had Wade Phillips and, was confident in doing that. Or when things were humming best for Mike Vrabel, he maybe could do that less because Arthur Smith was doing such a good job. So you have to find the right balance. It sounds like he didn't feel like he found the right balance necessarily last year. And so he'll tinker with it a lot. I think if Denard has a better personnel and is able to do what he wants, then I don't know, that Callahan will need to ride that seesaw to a different balance. But maybe at the beginning, it sounds like he certainly is going to want to, and then he'll find, whatever angle that needs to be at, or whatever the right slant is for him. But ideally, his focus is going to be predominantly on offense. That's why he was hired.
Sure.
He's going to have a quarterback to be working with and spending a lot of time on and designing an offense for. And plenty of new players to deal with, and an offensive line that's revamped with his dad and all of that. So I don't know if I'm a Titans fan, I would hope that his defensive side could handle it to whatever degree they need to handle it, with him paying the proper focus and giving the proper proportion of his attention to the offense.
615-737-1025 is our phone number. There was a deep dive taken on the Cam Ward front at paulkuharski.com yesterday. We'll get into that with PK coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, the game. Win an exclusive Jason Aldean experience. Text in the keyword Jason to 615-737-1025 and receive a link to sign up for a chance to win all-inclusive tickets to the Eurostone Club at Bridgestone Arena to see Jason Aldean, plus also a chance to win $1,000 in cash as well. Again, text the keyword Jason to 615-737-1025. Robby and Rexrode here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game, live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Paul Kuharsky from paulkuharsky.com with me all day long today on the program. So, PK, a deep dive on Cam Ward taken yesterday at paulkuharsky.com. Blake Bedingfield, who Titans fans are very familiar with around here, does a great job at kind of breaking down Cam Ward's strengths and weaknesses. You can check that out at paulkuharsky.com. Lots of analysis here on the Cam Ward front in terms of, some of the physical traits he brings to the table, some of maybe how quickly his game could translate at the NFL level. So as you were going through this with Blake Bedingfield on the Cam Ward front, what are maybe one or two things that really stand out to you the most as it relates to his breakdown of what the Titans could be getting with Cam Ward if that's the way they go, as we suspect, at number 1 overall?
Well, the good and the bad of the arm angle. We all know that he drops down and he throws from a lot of different slots, getting down into that sidearm, which there's good and there's bad to it, right? I mean, he can avoid some problems and get things out quickly and cleverly by doing that. But it also creates some danger. He didn't have a lot of passes batted down at Miami, but this is going to be different than Miami. And there's an invitation there while he's trying to fit things to get himself in trouble with this ear level delivery. It can get him in trouble the way it pairs with his footwork. All angles are low for a shorter quarterback, Blake says. And at times it's the kind of way that a short quarterback throws, a non-factor if a quarterback can consistently find throwing lanes for himself, but it becomes an issue if he does it with in the pocket with linemen in front of him, and if defensive linemen are watching for tip balls. And we know increasingly that if defensive linemen cannot get to the quarterback, I mean, it's a regular feature that they stop and look to bat balls. And so I think it's a different element that he's going to face in the NFL, and could create some problems for himself. And that's the way he's going to throw, right? I mean, they might try to encourage him to be a little bit more conscious of not dropping down as much. But, you learn time and time again that the way a guy throws coming out of college is going to be the way a guy throws, generally speaking.
Yeah.
If you're aiming to refine his throwing motion very much, you're in trouble.
Like, I can think of one off the top of my head where the throwing motion was refined pretty significantly, and that was Rodgers. Like, Rodgers, go look at Rodgers coming out of Cal, and then eventually what he turned into. It's a much different throwing motion. Rodgers used to hold the ball kind of with both hands up here by his ear, and then they changed that with him. But to your point,
and he had a lot of time.
He had a lot of time. He didn't play for 3 years. So there's, that's not going to be the case with Cam Ward. So by and large, I mean, you're right. When you draft a quarterback, you're kind of signing up for the mechanics that they've got, and you can make some changes along the way there. But by and large, the throwing motion is what their throwing motion is.
And Blake's largely enthusiastic about him. I mean, he's got him like 15th, but clearly thinks he's the best quarterback in here, thinks he's an NFL starter, ideal for most NFL schemes, and, can definitely do what Brian Callahan likes, working all 3 levels of the field and getting the ball out of his hand quickly to playmakers. So I think people will like what he has to say here. He writes these. He certainly wrote this like he would have written I think, a scouting report,
Yep.
you know, in-house. And he was with the Titans for 19 years. He still does consulting work for NFL teams. So he might be, you know, asked to look at running backs by a certain team or look at offensive linemen by another team. So I probably should have asked him to do this earlier, but seems like, you know, couldn't get further along the Cam Ward road now with the cancellation of the Shedeur Sanders / Travis Hunter individual workout, which would have been tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the things that's also interesting in here that he brings up, which we've talked about a lot. It's not like this is, you know, some breaking news here, but, you know, do the Titans have enough personnel to succeed around Ward? It's kind of the way he finishes off here. And you're looking at what they've got right now. I think the answer is no. Now there's still a draft to complete here and then more of free agency after that to get to. But, you know, one of the things that he brings up here is go back and look at quarterbacks that have succeeded after being drafted and go back and look at some that have failed. Is some of it just as simple as this guy was good enough and this other guy wasn't? Sure it was. But a lot of it can be traced back in his mind to, did the organization do what was required to set up these players for success? And that goes a long way in determining whether or not your quarterback is going to be successful. It ties in some ways back to the conversation we just had about Callahan. Like, is Callahan in his second year here drafting Cam Ward? Can he show enough in year one with Ward where you're confident in that partnership moving forward? And if he doesn't, are you automatically setting Ward up for failure if you're just just firing Callahan after his first year in this system? It's a Marcus, go back and look at him and the different coordinators that he had and everything. I'm not saying Marcus would have worked out because, like I said, sometimes you're just not good enough. But the Titans certainly have not helped some of these quarterbacks along in these situations.
Yeah, you give them a better chance with the consistent level and similar approach year to year. And if you're ultimately, if this is some kind of test for Brian Callahan, if the brain trust is thinking we'll see, that's not a very good strategy, because if you're picking a quarterback with number one in the draft, the number one pick in the draft, and your philosophy about your head coach is we'll see, you know, Cam Ward's not the youngest guy coming out. Now, I think that age thing with quarterbacks gets overplayed a little bit, but you want to give the guy every chance to excel. And if you're going to, if you're going into this season thinking we'll see about the head coach, well, if this is some sort of audition for Brian Callahan with Mike Borgonzi, first off, I don't think it's a very comfortable situation for Brian Callahan to do his best work, to relax, if you will. Not that it's a relaxing position, but you know what I mean.
Yep.
And then you're hiring in January. Then the guy's got a new playbook, and then some of their roster is not going to be favored by the head coach. It's a timing setback, and they need to. We talk all the time about the clock. They need to do everything they can to accelerate the clock, not just for Cam Ward, but for everybody. And having a lame duckish head coach does nothing for the franchise's clock.
Well, and beyond the roster, like I also think a lot of that's going to be on Callahan to show that he can be that guy. Yeah. Like I thought even with their roster limitations last year, which were, as the season went on, more and more evident. I mean, they couldn't block anybody. We know what the roster issues were last year. I still didn't think as the year went on that Callahan had enough answers to some of those problems as the year went on last year. And he's got to find a way in year two to come up with some more answers and to look at, especially when you're drafting a rookie quarterback at number one overall, there needs to be some meaningful progress from that quarterback from the time you bring him into the building So the time the first game rolls around to the time game number 17 in the regular season is done, you need to see some dramatic improvement from that process together. Because if you don't, then I think, and Ed brings this up on the text line, I think it's a fair question. If you don't see that, then I think you look around if you're the Titans and you say, well, we really don't want to wreck the quarterback here and bring in another coach and do all that. But like we gave this guy a shot with Will Levis, and Levis looked like he got worse as the year went on and as the season in year 2 under Callahan. And now Ward has come in, and there's been really no progress to speak of, or not enough meaningful progress to see. At some point, you look at the coach and you ask, okay, does he know what he's doing? Like, is he the guy we thought he was when he was brought in to be this quarterback guy?
And Callahan is a beaut in terms of candor. I think, and I'm not putting this on outgoing PR, but I think this is something incoming PR could do that would help him. Like he fell into a coach better, play better with me there. I think they could be more hyper aware of stuff like that. Like this market is allergic to coach better, play better from Vrabel, who was, I think everybody after a year of Callahan certainly will say he's a good coach. And depending on what happens in New England, I'm expecting New England to have a decent trajectory. Give Callahan a couple, coach him with a couple of rotate through these 4 different alternatives to coach better, play better.
Yeah. Come up with something else. Titans fans are going to throw themselves around if you keep saying stuff like that. 615-737-1025, our phone number. We do have Pred's Pick to Click coming up next. Be the first caller at 615-737-1025. We'll get to more of your thoughts on the Titans front, plus a move yesterday that the Titans have now made official. We'll get PK's thoughts on all that. Nick Baumgardner from The Athletic coming up at 7 o'clock. All that ahead. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Preds Pick to Click on Robby and Rexrode here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. We need a caller, 615-737-1025. If you guess the goal scored tonight for the Preds, you'll win a pair of tickets to a future Nashville Predators home game. Be caller number 1, 615-737-1025. A standings update. Rexrode is in fantastic shape, basically purely with the assistance of Paul Kuharski to win this competition. I think Kuharski's gotten 3 for him this year.
Carrying him on my back, which is hard to do.
And he's up by 3. Rexrode, 15 correct answers. The listeners with 12. I'm at 7. Keyser moved up to 5 last time out. So Kuharski's 3 wins in this competition, the difference so far between Rexrode and the listeners at Preds Pick to Click, which means, PK, you're up first today in the competition. Preds are taking on the New York Islanders tonight. Your pick to click for the Nashville Predators.
I'll go Forsberg.
Philip Forsberg, the selection by Paul Kuharski. So Forsberg is off the board. I told you, there's only a couple guys right now that are even really approaching scoring for the Predators at the moment. Forsberg, certainly one of those guys. I'm going to go, I've got a hunch tonight. I'm going Michael Bunting on the power play. So I'll go Michael Bunting for the Predators. Forsberg and Bunting are off the board. Keyser is on the phone with someone right now who is going to be as part of our competition as well. So we'll get those thoughts here in just a minute. By the way, big game tonight for the Islanders. Predators with, I think, 5 more. We got 5 more? 5 more games coming up for the Nashville Predators.
Nick was really chatting that dude up.
He was. Let's go to Keith and welcome him in. Keith, thanks for calling in the Preds Pick to Click. Forsberg and Bunting are off the board. Your pick to click tonight for the Nashville Predators.
I guess I'll go Stamkos.
Going with Steven Stamkos. Thank you, Keith, for the call. So Stamkos, Forsberg, Bunting off the board. Keyser, your pick to click.
I'm going to go with, it's really late. It doesn't matter. I'm going to go with Nick Blankenberg. Why not?
He is on the top power play unit. So Nick Blankenberg for Nick Keyser. Stamkos, Forsberg, Bunting, Blankenberg, the selections in Preds pick to click. PK, the Titans make a move official yesterday. So Stilly talked about this a few weeks ago that they were targeting this person. You advanced that report last week, and now the Titans have made it official that Taylor Zarzer is the next voice of the Tennessee Titans, following in the footsteps of Mike Keith, and that he's going to be filling the role that Keith leaves behind there. So Zarzer coming in, who's done a lot of things with the SEC network. He's been on calls for some pretty big SEC football games. Has a history here in town with a radio show he did in town at this point, almost, 20 years ago at this point. So what do you make of now what the Titans have made official, PK, and Taylor Zarzer coming in to fill in the footsteps of Mike Keith?
I'm not that familiar with his work, but I think he's talented and a solid pick. Jim Nantz endorsed, which certainly carries
that helps
a lot of weight. Again, I'm surprised. I shouldn't be by fan reaction, and maybe it's disproportionate what I'm getting. People are just so provincial. I just wish it was a guy from here that I could relate to. There is a whole big world out there. Mike Keith was one of a kind guy, and it was great that he was local and that you could relate to him in that way. It's just 30 years ago, and you got 30 great years out of Mike Keith. But, there wasn't necessarily somebody in this local pool who was a home run pick that had experience calling games at a high enough level to be the guy. And so how about, you're going to be open-minded with Cam Ward, who's not local? Yeah. I mean, I understand it's a different thing. But when the guy sits in the chair and starts calling the game, I think, is he talented at calling the game? And how's his voice sound?
Yeah.
How does the fact that he shops at the same Kroger you do influence that? Just why? It's such a small town thinking. It makes you unworthy of having a major league team.
I've always, people do this too with go hire, and it's really a college sports things. Like Tennessee fans have done this all the time of go hire our guy to be the coach. And it's why don't you just go hire the most qualified person? Why can't we do that? I don't care where Taylor Zarzour. And by the way, he's got a background here, so it's not like he's completely unfamiliar with this place. But like, if Taylor Zarzour, and I've watched a lot of Taylor Zarzour, he's good. Like he's a good play-by-play guy. That's really the only thing I care about. Like, are you good at the job? So I haven't seen a ton of that as far as the reaction. Look, I am fully aware that when you're following somebody like Mike Keith, that's a hard thing to do. Like, I'm aware of that. And there are going to be some Titans fans that are like, well, he's never going to be Mike Keith. And
He's not.
Look, he's not. So I think you have to know that going into it. But like, for everything I know about the guy, he seems like a pretty good hire for the Titans. So, and I know he can call games. I've watched him call games. So I know from that standpoint, they're going to be fine. So I'm cool with it. I think it's a good move by the Titans.
Give the guy a chance. Give the guy a chance. And don't predetermine you don't like him because he didn't grow up here. You know, there are a lot of good people who've done a lot of good things for this organization who didn't grow up here.
I mean, you didn't grow up here, and look how much of a peach you are.
Yeah. Well, guess who didn't grow up here? The organization didn't grow up here.
That's a good point. 615-737-1025, our phone number. We'll be joined by Nick Baumgardner from The Athletic coming up next. We'll get into the NFL draft with him. We'll have the Rob Rant coming up next hour. Mike Herndon from PaulKuharski.com will be with us at 8:30. All that ahead. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Hour number 2, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by First Horizon, Big Bank Muscle, Small Bank Hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get-it-all. Robby Stanley, Paul Kuharski in for Joe today here on the program. Nick Keyser as well here with you on this Tuesday morning, talking NFL draft. And to help us do that, we head to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcome in friend of the show, Nick Baumgardner, who covers the NFL draft at The Athletic. Nick, good morning. How are you?
Morning, guys. How are you?
Doing awesome, man. Appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning. So, Nick, it looks pretty clear that the Titans are going to end up taking Cam Ward at number 1 overall. As you've watched him, as you've studied him, as you've spoken with people, what do you think the Titans are getting in Cam Ward if that's the way that it looks like they go here at number 1?
Yeah, I like Cam Ward a lot. It's a tricky evaluation because he hasn't had, a lot of experience against, top tier teams the way we would see normally with some of these quarterbacks where they go through the SEC or the Big Ten or whatever it is and see, really elite defenses. But Cam's story is super unique, right? So I think he's a worker. He's a guy who understands how to improve. He's improved every single year. He's been in college. And I think when you take his entire, story into context, this was a wing T quarterback that had no offers anywhere. Incarnate Word took him, and I don't think they thought he was going to be ready to do anything. And he set records there immediately, showed everyone he could do some things that people didn't realize. And then every year since, it's been, a consistent upward trajectory. So I think that in that sense, when you talk to scouts, I think they all assume, or not assume, but, they are very hopeful that track of improvement every year will just continue. He's not a true junior or something, but I think if you look at his entire football experience, he's still pretty, young. And I think there's a lot to mold there. And I think that, the ability to jump into a new situation this year at Miami, make plays immediately, be calm. As we know, there's some hiccups here and there that he's got to clean up a lot, actually, as a guy who just doesn't have a ton of experience. But I do think Cam has a natural feel for the game. I think he's a playmaker. I think he'll always maybe be a guy who runs the edge of, maybe being a little bit too risky, but also at the same time, it seems like guys like to rally around him too. So I like him. I like him a lot. I mean, it took a while for me, and I think others too, to get on board with that train. And I'm not sure I would have him as the number 1 player on my board or even in the top 10 of that, but he's definitely in the top 15. And I think that if you're going to take a quarterback up there, it's absolutely Cam Ward.
Do you have any sense of his lower body mechanics and what kind of concerns there are there? That's something I've heard about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are significant. And I think that that's the biggest thing that we're looking at here. When you look at how he plays, it's all very loose and, kind of free and open, which, allows him to make plays very quickly sometimes, but also, he got away with a lot of stuff in college with his feet. He's not a guy who, takes your, snaps the ball and immediately bangs into a 3-step drop, comes up on the hitch and throws the ball. It's a lot of sort of at his own pace, his own feel with the receivers and timing. We saw that a lot, and that works, to a degree in college, and it won't, in the NFL. It's not a uncommon problem, but I think when we're talking about, a guy like this, who's, like we said earlier, like he's never really had to be in a huge fire of a game where it's like, man, you can't do this. You can't just freelance on every play or roll out of a sack or whatever it is because you think you're more athletic to do it. So that's the big thing. But I think the thing that everybody goes back to is because normally when you say, okay, the guy's got bad feet or he's not, not on his footwork at all, especially if he's an older quarterback, you just kind of say, well, maybe that's just who he is and he's never going to get there. But with Cam, I think that's, probably not fair. I think that he has improved at something pretty significantly almost every year, whether it be, mechanics with throwing the ball, reading the defense, processing, all that sort of thing. And the last thing to come there, obviously, is going to be his feet, getting in time and rhythm with the offense. So it's going to have to be a lot of coaching there. They're going to have to, a lot of patience, a lot of coaching, and really, just kind of hammering down on, the things you cannot get away with at this level. And I think everybody from Caleb Williams to Bryce Young and every other young quarterback that's come out would say similar, as they've all had to kind of go through similar things, maybe not as severe. I think Cam's is maybe a little bit more work there.
So, Nick, obviously, if you're a Titans fans looking at this, you expect Cam Ward to go number 1 overall. And then the question becomes, what are you going to do at number 35 in the second round? And frankly, the Titans need just about everything on their roster. So there's a lot of need that they have.
Right.
I want to ask you specifically about receiver. When you get toward the latter part of the first round and into the early part of the second round in terms of your projections moving ahead here, what do you make of the receiver position, the quality of what the Titans and other teams could find there, and some guys maybe that stand out in that area that could be there?
Yeah, I think Tennessee's actually in a good spot there at the top of the second. It's going to be an interesting year to see where these guys fall. It's not the deepest receiver class we've seen. It's not like some of the ones we've seen in recent years. It's not bad, but it's kind of like in the middle. You know what I mean? But I do think that if you're at the top of the second round there, after Ted McMillan, Egbuka, Matthew Golden, I think those guys are all pretty much, after Travis Hunter, of course, too. I think those guys are pretty much all locks to be first round picks. But I think also, like, if you're at the top of the second, you could end up looking at Luther Burden, the kid from Mizzou, who did not have a great year last year. I think a lot of that was based on the quarterback and the offense just not really being great there at Missouri. But he is a difference maker with the ball in his hands. A guy who it was a huge yards after catch guy his entire career there in college. Jalen Knoll, the kid from Iowa State, I love him, and his teammate Jaden Higgins. I think both of those guys are ready to go pretty much immediately. And then that's, and again, if you can get a guy like Golden to slip or Egbuka to slip. And the other thing too, I would wonder about is if you want to trade up, if you're Tennessee, if you think that if Emeka Egbuka is slipping down there into the 20s or, late 20s even, and you're at 35 and you say, okay, well, what does Cam Ward need to be successful? Number one, he needs to be protected, but number two, he needs, a best friend type wide receiver who can just get open all the time. And I think that it would be smart to, not take a look and see if Egbuka's fallen, go get him. I mean, he's the most quarterback friendly receiver in this class. And the other guys I mentioned too would pretty much tick off the box for the same thing. Luther Burden, some people have him as a first round talent. I think some people will have Jalen Knoll right on the fringe in this draft too. So they're in really good shape there to get, a friendly target, we'll say, for a young quarterback who's going to need all the help he can get there.
You've done a deep dive in the recent past on Jordan Palmer and his work with Kyle McCord. I'm wondering, out of your familiarity with Jordan Palmer, if you could give us a sense of what you think Will Levis is getting out of a couple months of work with Jordan Palmer.
Yeah, I wish Will Levis had started this 2 years ago or 3 years ago with Jordan. But I think the biggest thing that he does, and we just talked about it with Cam with the footwork stuff, right? The one thing that I learned from him is everything is about staying grounded, keeping your feet in the ground, and making sure that you're sort of attached to the ground before you throw. You can't just be off balance and just sort of wobbly and chuck it without your whole body. And I think a lot of the work that he does, the first couple of weeks when he gets a new person in there, they don't even touch a football. It's just, footwork stuff. I mean, he worked for months on Kyle McCord's shotgun stance, a matter of getting your feet so that your first step is one that is productive rather than something that you have to recover from. And I think that's a lot of what, he teaches. A lot of the, no throws anymore. I mean, very rarely are you making a throw completely on platform without anybody touching you. You've got to move around, obviously, and you've got to have the ability to do that, but you've got to also have the ability to make sure that, your foot's loaded, you're in the ground, and you're making sure that, your next move after that is something that, is going to be productive to the rotation, on the top of everything else. But I do think it's a ground up thing with Jordan. I think that's always been the bag on Levis. Even when he was at Kentucky, it was just elite arm talent, really good athlete, just wobbly everything else. The technique was just all over the place. And I think with Palmer, it really starts from the snap. I mean, he goes from every step that you're going to take in every possible, drop. So that's one where I wish it started a couple of years ago, quite frankly. But I do think that's a smart move on Levis's part to go seek him out.
Nick, as you look at running back here, like everybody's looking at the top with Genty, obviously, and he's an unbelievable talent. How deep do you think this class is at running back? We've been asked about Scadaboo, obviously Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee here. Like it feels to me that this is a very deep class at that spot. How do you view running back this year in the draft?
Yeah, it's outstanding. It might be the deepest class or the deepest group of any, position group in the draft this year. I think last year there was 20 running backs taken, somewhere like that. I think this year I would not be surprised if it's 30 or more, which I think would be pretty close to the record. If not, in the last 15 years anyway, it would be up there with matching any of those classes. I think that, and the other part of it too is, there's a good 20 guys in here who can help a team tomorrow, that in some way, shape, or form. We talk about guys like Jinty and Omarion Hampton and Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson. These are guys that can come in and probably be your 1A or just your solo one. But there's guys in there. You mentioned Scadaboo, Damian Martinez, a kid from Miami, RJ Harvey from UCF there, Jordan James from Oregon. These are guys, Trevor Etienne, Etienne's brother there at Georgia. These are all guys I think that can also come in right away, and you could get them maybe third, fourth round. I think there's going to be players even in the fifth round this year that you can draft and say, hey, we can put him in and he can do some things right now. It won't be just like a surprise or added bonus if this kid comes in here and helps us out. I think it's a really, really good year to need a running back, and almost even if you don't need one like right away, if you're thinking, if you've got an older guy that maybe is going to come off the roster here in a year or two, like this would be a good year to sort of go ahead and say, hey, these are playmakers. These are guys that can handle a load. A lot of them are super, super productive, across the board. A lot of these guys like Ja'Cory Krusky-Merritt was one of the best players at the Shrine Bowl from Arizona there, and he's probably a fifth round pick in this draft. In a lot of other drafts, he'd be a second or third round guy. I think that's the situation here with running back. The one interesting thing though is, you don't know where the run's going to start. So a lot of teams have talked about, maybe we wait, but you don't want to wait too long because if there's a run on these guys and they all start going, then, we're going to be out of luck.
Can you compare and contrast? Obviously, some great tight ends in this draft. Up at the top, you've got Warren and Loveland. What are the biggest differences and similarities between the two of them?
Yeah, they're both really fun players. I think Warren is the better physical, athlete from a power presence. I mean, I think he has the highest potential of any of these guys from a blocking standpoint, like the potential to be a possible dominant blocker. When you look at him, I mean, he's just a fridge on wheels out there. He reminds me a lot of Dallas Clark, the old Iowa tight end that played there forever with the Colts and Peyton Manning. A guy that is a true 3-down weapon. Loveland, I think, is a better route runner. But Warren, anyway, I think is a true, 3-down weapon. You don't have to ever have to take him off the field. And I think in time he can become a guy who's, a true asset in the run game, sort of a way maybe a George Kittle is or something like that. And then just kind of a safety net, receiver. I don't think he's ever going to put up 98 catches like he did in college there for a team, but I think he's always going to be a pretty sturdy, number one that, it's going to be hard to find anybody that's doing more at that position than him. And then Loveland, and this is close. I mean, these guys it's 1A and 1B, and it goes back and forth a lot of times because Loveland is easily the best route runner in this tight end group, and he's up there with some of these wide receivers. I mean, this guy can run any route from pretty much anywhere. He worked a lot in the slot. He worked outside at Michigan. He was also a very willing blocker. Not as good as Warren, I don't think, but he was still a guy that wasn't afraid to mix it up. He reminds me a lot of Sam Laporta here in Detroit, maybe a little bit taller version of Laporta. He's another guy who can get the ball out in space and then make plays after the catch. He doesn't always fall down the minute he catches it type thing. So these are different dudes here. Mason Taylor, another one there from LSU, Jason Taylor's son, just an outstanding athlete. There's 5 or 6 guys again in this class, maybe 7 or 8 actually, who are really, really good players who can do a lot of things for a team.
Well, Nick, great stuff, man. Really appreciate your time as always. Thanks for being with us this morning. And we're just a few weeks away from the draft here. We'll have fun.
Oh, yeah.
Have fun. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Take care, fellas.
Absolutely. Nick Baumgartner, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. We'll react to what Nick had to say. Take your thoughts on the NFL draft coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. This week's Nashville's Best Deal is from 12 Stones Crossing Golf Club in Goodlettsville. They offer 18 championship holes spanning over 6,800 yards with the meandering Madison Creek as its centerpiece. Get half off a $50 gift card while supplies last at theGameNashville.com/deals. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Appreciate Nick Baumgartner for being with us in the last segment. Skyler on the text line, PK, saying, all this talent in other positions in this year's draft that the Titans badly need, especially tight end, and the Titans are about to reach on the 13th best player in the draft at number 1 overall. It's the Titan way, baby. We love it. Tighten up. This from Skyler on the text line. Doesn't seem very excited about Cam Ward.
I don't know. What do you have them do to position for the tight end, who's probably the 13th best player in the draft? Also, I don't disagree. Cam Ward's probably 13th in the draft, but Warren and Loveland aren't first
in the same neighborhood. Yeah. I don't know. Like, to me, that the trade back, that's when that starts to become more attractive is players like that. Like, look, I think Warren's going to be really good. I think Loveland's got a chance to be really good in the NFL too. But right now, I mean, the bottom line is you need a quarterback. Like, you're not going to take either one of those guys number 1 overall, right? Like,
no.
So I understand the idea of this. Also gets back into with Ward specifically. Like, what is an acceptable outcome if you're a Titans fan for picking him at number 1? Because I think some people think that if you pick him at number 1, he's got to be Mahomes. And I don't buy into that. Like, I think
there's not going to be Mahomes.
Yeah, he's not going to be Mahomes, first off. And number 2, like, I don't buy into if you're picking somebody at number 1 that they've got to be Joe Burrow, Josh Allen level elite, who, by the way, Josh Allen was not picked at number 1. My point is, I brought this example up a lot, and I know that what happened in Cleveland, and there's a lot of things that have gone on there that lead to this. And now what he's turned into in Tampa Bay, I do think he's a different, better player in Tampa Bay. But, like, if they took Cam Ward and he turned out to be Baker Mayfield in the NFL at number 1 overall.
On a faster track.
Wouldn't you take that? Like, Baker Mayfield's not Mahomes. Baker Mayfield's not Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen. But I'd take that. I would take what Baker Mayfield is now 10 times out of 10 with a number 1 overall pick. That's just me. Some Titans fans wouldn't, and I get it. Like, you want to have the superstar guy. I would take Baker Mayfield right now at the number 1 overall pick based on what he's turned out to be.
I would too. You wish it was better. But also a lot of these guys bust. And so it could be worse. I would take a steady Baker Mayfield. There was Cleveland chaos there. But if you got the guy who's playing in Tampa Bay now, I think, and he's come up as the line in several conversations that I've had.
Yep.
And I think that's a reasonable line. And I think people that, obviously you aspire to more.
Of course.
You want more, but he's a playoff caliber quarterback who does some really good things. And he's got the moxie and the leadership. And did it take a while? And did he have to move around a lot and all of that? Yeah. Part of that was, there was some immaturity on his part at the beginning. And I don't know that you're going to deal with that element of it with Cam Ward at the beginning.
Part of that's where he was drafted too.
Yeah, and part of that was the surroundings of a dysfunctional team. And the Titans are a dysfunctional team now. I don't know that they're dysfunctional in the same way that the Browns, or in all the same ways that the Browns were dysfunctional when Baker Mayfield arrived there. But they were unwise to give up on him when they did, though. You're facing that contract at a time when you're uncertain. I can't remember all of the circumstances of that at the time. If the Titans can get Baker Mayfield out of this draft, and he can be Baker Mayfield faster, I'm with you. I'd take that. And I'm not a big Cam Ward guy. I'm not. But I also think, like, you might be outsmarting yourself if you're trying to do something else. Now, I do think there's one factor here that messes everything up. That's Abdul Carter's foot.
Yeah.
Abdul Carter's foot messes a lot of things up. Now, can you justify taking Abdul Carter, a healthy guy that doesn't have a potential long-term concern, an edge rusher? Can you justify taking that guy ahead of the best quarterback in the draft? I don't know if you can or you can't. But I don't think you can justify taking Abdul Carter with a potential thing that could turn into something, especially when his agent, who's a blowhard, tells you at the combine that in the combine's end of February.
Yep. By the end of March,
tells
he's gonna be
you March 28th, he's going to do everything at his pro day, and he does nothing at his pro day. Now maybe your medical people tell you it's not going to be anything, but still there's a little nugget of concern there. And if that comes back to bite you, you're going to be kicking yourself as a franchise for a long time.
I got one texter that says, Robby, if you take Baker Mayfield in Tampa as the number 1 overall pick right now, your bar is too low. I don't know. You tell me, guys. He threw for 4,500 yards and 41 touchdowns and completed 71% of his passes this year. Is that not good enough?
Yeah.
You tell me.
I mean, 41 touchdowns. What do you want as a Titans fan?
I'm going to assume that this is probably just not somebody that's not really familiar with what he did this year in Tampa Bay. Again, Baker Mayfield's not perfect. He also threw 16 picks. So, he turns the ball over a little bit too much. But he throws the ball a ton. He completed 71% of his passes, threw for 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns. We've never seen a Titans quarterback do that ever.
Ryan Tannehill's best year, 2020, he threw 33 touchdowns. And in his worst year, interception-wise, in 2021, he threw 14 picks. So what did you just say for Mayfield?
He threw for 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns, 16 picks.
41 touchdowns, 16 picks. That's 2 more picks than Tannehill's worst year. It's 12 more touchdowns than Tannehill's best year. And Tannehill's best year was 3,800 yards. I mean, these are all benchmarks that are substantially better than Tannehill's best, and Tannehill's been the most productive Titans quarterback.
Yeah, I don't think
so. You can draft a guy that's substantially better than the best guy that they've had, and you don't want him.
I'll tell you right now, if they draft Cam Ward, what are the chances that he ever has a season where he throws for 4,500 yards and 41 touchdowns? I'm not saying he can't do it or that he won't do it.
But
the chances are low.
If he did do it, you'd be thrilled that he did it.
Right.
And it would be Baker Mayfield.
Exactly. So, again, I'm not trying to sit here and act like Baker Mayfield is the be-all, end-all. But I'm just saying, I think there's a huge difference between, Patrick Mahomes and Peyton Manning and those guys being taken number 1 overall. Of course you want that. I would also take what Baker Mayfield has become as a number 1 overall pick and be just fine with that if I'm the Tennessee Titans. Of course you want the best. You want more. I get that. But Baker Mayfield's turned into a pretty darn good player down there in Tampa Bay. 615-737-1025, our phone number. More of your thoughts to get to on the NFL draft front. We'll do that coming up next. Plus, an epidemic in the world of sports that PK and I are determined to solve. We'll get into that coming up next as well. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. The Atlanta Braves country road trip coming to town and teaming up with the Nashville Predators on 102.5 The Game. Join us at the BetMGM Sports Lounge in Bridgestone Arena on Wednesday, April 16th for a Braves watch party as they take on the Tampa Bay Rays at noon. There'll be free giveaways like hats and T-shirts, plus you can win autographed baseballs, free Braves tickets to a game of your choice. Also, the first 15 people in the door will win a pair of tickets to that night's Preds game as well. For more details, visit thegamenashville.com/events. Robby and Rexrode brought to you by First Horizon. Big bank muscle, small bank hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get-it-all. PK, a lot of thoughts on the Baker Mayfield comp that we just threw out there. Got Skyler that says, I'd love Baker Mayfield and the Titans. Problem is we don't have Mike Evans or Chris Godwin. One texter says, I'm all for peak Baker Mayfield type of play, but do the decision makers have the patience to wait the 6 years in order to get there? That's why we say fast track. Like,
we're
to answer the question, no,
as slow.
They do not have the patience, nor will they have the
no,
jobs.
No franchise has 6 years to wait on their quarterback to pan out. That's a second contract. The number one pick in the draft has to do something within 3 years.
Well, that's what also makes the Baker situation so interesting. It's because he did in Cleveland. Like, I think people forget, like, he made the playoffs and won a playoff game with the Browns.
In his third year.
Now, after that, he tried to play through an injury that next year, and it wasn't good. Like, he threw 17 touchdowns, 13 picks, had a completion percentage of 60.5. Like, it went down on him, and then that was the end of it. And then we all know what happened in Cleveland after that, and they went and got Deshaun Watson, and here they sit.
But as a rookie, in 13 starts, he threw 27 touchdowns, 14 picks. Now, you don't like those picks. That's pretty much a 2-for-1 ratio, but 27 touchdowns, 3,700 yards. I mean, there's something to work with there.
For sure.
Now, Tennessee traditionally is going to want much more conservative, structured, safe play there. Second year, 22 touchdowns, 21 interceptions. It's
a lot of turnovers
in the realm. Third year, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. You take that.
Yep.
And they went 11-5.
Yeah. I mean, look,
threw for
like
30,
I said,
3,500 yards.
It wasn't perfect with him during his time in Cleveland, obviously, which is, they thought eventually they could do better and end up with Deshaun Watson, and it's been an unmitigated disaster for them ever since then. Like, I understand that they thought they could do better at the time. I guarantee you, if you went back and had Cleveland do it all over again now, not only would they not do Deshaun Watson, but they'd probably keep Baker Mayfield. Like, they would probably sign up to keep Baker Mayfield around based on the way that he's played. So again, I'm not trying to turn this into a Baker Mayfield love fest here. I'm just saying that I think the line and the range of what could end up being a pretty good pick as a number one overall quarterback doesn't always have to be like your elite of the elite Hall of Fame level quarterback. You can do a lot of winning in this league with pretty darn good quarterback play that Baker Mayfield's giving Tampa Bay right now. That's my point. So, like, we talk about all the busts that are when you're taking a first round quarterback, when you're taking a quarterback number one overall, there's a high bust rate there too. Well, I also think that if you could get one of these players where you solidify that spot and you've got a chance to play meaningful football games and win and get into the playoffs, you could do a whole lot worse than that if you're the Titans taking Cam Ward, and that's what he turns out to be at number one overall.
I mean, he's even better than I thought looking at the numbers.
Yeah.
And I've been a fan of the resurgence of Baker Mayfield. I would take somebody a notch lesser than what Mayfield did last year at number one. My bar is a little less than last year's Mayfield for the number one pick.
Well, and again, like, Ward, there are some people that are making, I wouldn't say a big deal because it's not like it's Hendon Hooker or anything, the age coming out of college. But Cam Ward, when he plays and takes a snap for the Titans next year, he'll be 23. He turns 23 coming up in May. So it's not your your younger guy. It's kind of similar to Levis. Like Levis was an older guy coming out of college. So there's not part of the selling point when the Colts took Anthony Richardson as high as they did was, well, not only has he not played a lot of football, he's also really young. So there's more room for growth here. Like Cam Ward, with the amount of football that he's played in college, like you ought to get a pretty good idea. And Blake Bedingfield at paulkuharski.com touches on this a little bit. Like based on the amount of football that he's played, his age, things that he's seen with the playing time that he's gotten, like you should have a pretty good baseline of exactly where he is when he comes into the league and try to project upside from there. Like I don't think Cam Ward is like an impressive enough athlete where he's just going to blow you away with what he does athletically out there on the field. I think the big question with him is going to be, can he consistently deliver the football accurately over and over and over again? I have no doubt that Ward is going to make some incredible throws this year. He's going to make some throws where you just say, wow, look at that. Look at that play from him. It's the routine plays. Can he make them over and over again? In some ways, he's kind of similar to Levis in that regard, PK, which I know scares the crap out of people when they hear it.
I also think it takes him 18-yard sacks.
Yeah.
He thinks he can retreat and circle, and he got away with some of that on some plays in college. There's some McNair comparisons because he's got some escapability where he survives initial attack and recovers and makes a play. And he'll do that sometimes. But I think there are also some times where he thinks he can save a play where, coaches use the cliche that the journey, you got to know when the journey's over.
Yep.
And there may be a lesson for him to learn about when the journey's over in the NFL. And there may be some 18-yard sacks before he fully learns that lesson. And second and 28 or 38 is not a place to be.
Caleb says, I can't believe people say Baker isn't good enough for a Ward comp. There's an 80% chance any quarterback taken in the first round is a bust. And we're going to sit here as Titans fans and say Baker isn't good enough. This fan base isn't pathetic. I will say, just to be fair, I mean, most of the responses that we've gotten to this point would be like, yeah, I'd take Baker Mayfield. So there are some that have said that that's not a high enough bar. I do not believe that that is the majority that is taking place here. So,
well, only 300 votes in, and I know not everybody on Twitter is listening to the show, which was a part of my point. I put, if the Titans draft Cam Ward and his best statistical season is 4,500 yards, 71.4 completion percentage, 41 TDs, and 16 picks, is that a success? Of 325 people, 93% say yes.
It's pretty overwhelming.
And I'm not saying that's Baker Mayfield in the question, but people are smart enough to say yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think most people would sign up for that all day long. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We'll have the Rob rant coming up next, a problem in the world of sports that PK and I are going to attempt to solve. We'll get into that. We will have Mike Herndon from paulkuharski.com joining us at 8:30. All that coming up. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Don't make me angry.
Sometimes you have to tell someone to pound sand.
You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
This is the Rob Rant. Now on Robby and Rexrode.
I don't mind casual conversation at the gym. Like, I'm cool with talking to people. But, like, we don't need to go through the entire history of your life and my life and what all is going on while I'm in the middle of a workout. Like, it's one thing if we're just sitting there, but, I'm lifting weights and this guy's like, so what do you think about this? And I'm like, oh, it's great. It's awesome.
When you put those things together, that just makes me realize, I haven't made deviled eggs in a long time, and I love deviled eggs.
I think you should keep it off the menu.
Man, if you had my deviled eggs, you get that right amount of paprika in there, man, come on.
Yeah, you will really get farted up with that stuff, okay? It is that time of the day, time of the Rob Rant here on Robby and Rexrode. PK with me here on the program. We'll take your thoughts on our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. So, PK, there's a huge problem in the world of sports, and you made me aware of this piece last night at The Ringer by Kurt Goldsberry, going through this problem. And I think we have a lot of people that, at least at one point in their life, maybe not now, maybe they are now, have been fans of the NBA, whether that was when you were a kid growing up, whether that was when, I don't know, you got attached to a player, whether it's Kobe Bryant or LeBron or whoever. I think we would all agree that right now there's a huge problem in the NBA as it relates to viewership. The numbers are going down. The ratings have been bad this year in the NBA. They tried a new format with the All-Star game that was completely terrible. And I think a big problem that people have with the game right now are, man, they sure shoot a lot of threes. There are a lot of threes out there or a dunk, and that's basically what an offensive possession is. It's either a three-point shot or a dunk. And we've said that for a while. And I guess I've never really put the numbers to it, but Kurt Goldsberry in this piece at The Ringer does put the numbers to it. And he brings up a specific game between the Celtics and the Thunder, where the Celtics took 63 three-point shots in a game, 63 of them, and they missed 43. So that means that throughout the course of the game, they made a total of 41 shots, which means they missed more three-pointers than they made shots in total throughout the entire game. Of the game's 176 total field goal attempts, 100 were threes, 76 were twos. And the question that Goldsberry throws out there is, are threes still lovely when they make up 57% of a game shot? So, PK, here's where I come down on this. Like, watching Steph Curry play basketball is a lot of fun. Like, his ability to pull up from basically anywhere is incredible. Not everybody's Steph Curry, and not everybody can do that. And the game basically has turned into a three-point contest, or you have to go get a dunk, and there's no in between. Like, the mid-range game is essentially dead in the NBA. I've long since given up hope of, like, the big man being a big factor. Like, Jokic is a huge factor in the NBA, but even he's a different type of big man than we used to see. He can pass, he can shoot the three, he can do all those things. So I think the NBA has got a huge problem in terms of the three-point shot. I don't know at this point when we're getting back to going the other way where there's more of a blend. I love the three-point shot. I love it in moderation. I think, like most things in life, PK, it needs to be in moderation, and they've gotten out of control with this in the NBA. It's hard to watch. It's hard to watch when teams are just going back up and down the floor and trading threes all the time.
My big takeaway from this piece and the heat map that he shows of where shots are taken is that the corner three is out of control. All right. And we know that's a straight line down the sideline for a while before it turns into an arc, because the court is not wide enough for the arc to be an arc out to the corner. So the corner three is the most valuable shot in the game. Is that how the game was designed? For people to stand out on the wings in the corners and to be gunning from there? That's disproportionate by a long shot. And so what he proposes really is a modernization of the three. It has not changed since it was put in there. It changed once, and they moved it in, and they put it back. What they need to do is put it further back because it's too easy. The percentages make it the shot you want because the value of a make is too good. Move the line back and kill the line when the arc ends. so that a corner jumper is a 2-point shot. And so make it an arc and have the arc end. And then the corners are just 2-point shots. I love that idea. I think it modernizes, and I think the NBA has not been amenable to, it used to be, the key became a lane and things like that happened, but when's the last change of this magnitude that keeps up with it? Say what you will about baseball, but it's done, and baseball's the most stoic, non-changing sport, but it's done things to change the game for a better viewing product. And the NFL's always tinkering. I think basketball, and I agree with the author here, needs to change it to make mid-range more important and to decrease the three by moving it back and getting rid of corner threes.
It's an interesting proposal. Like, I've not seen anybody lay it out exactly this way in terms of basically eliminating the arc and the corner three that would be involved there. It is interesting. Like, you look at this heat map, and the heat map is titled most common shots in the NBA during the 2024-25 season. And there's a map basically all the way around the 3-point line that really just gets hammered in on the corner of both sides and then directly under the basket. Other than that, like, there's nothing at the elbow, there's nothing at the foul line, there's nothing anywhere near being a step or two inside the 3-point line. And I don't necessarily blame NBA teams because they've run numbers on this. They've got analytics departments that tell them these are the two shots you need to try to get, either the three or directly underneath the basket. Like, that's where you need to go. So they're just doing what the numbers tell them they should do. I get that. Having said that, purely from a viewership standpoint, like, I think that's part of why you're seeing the numbers and the viewership numbers go down. And there's probably a lot to it, but that's part of it. Is I think people are tired of just watching teams run up and down the court and just chuck threes up all the time. Again, it's fun to watch Steph Curry do his thing. Not everybody's Steph Curry out there. So they've got a real problem on their hands from a viewership standpoint. I think that they got to find a way to get figured out here. And I don't know if you leave things alone, whether or not the game is going to actually – I know the game goes in cycles, right? Like, LeBron's talked about this. Like, basically, he was talking about this on his podcast with Steve Nash the other day. When he came in the league, every team had two bigs, and that was the way they operated their offense. And then it went down to one big when Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire were in Phoenix doing their thing. And essentially in today's game, it's turned into 5 out. He said it's like you don't even worry about the bigs other than like Jokic, but even he's a different guy. And it's a 5 out offense, and everybody can shoot threes and all those things. I get the game evolves, but I do think you have a problem when you're just walking back up and down the court and chucking up threes every possession.
Also, rebounding is a totally different thing than it was, I don't want, quote unquote, intended to be, because the rebounds off the three obviously are not coming out near the basket, which reduces the importance of the bigs and allows littler people, quote unquote, much further from the basket to be in the rebounding game. And a put back, you're not exactly putting the ball back when you're getting a rebound.
Yeah, 6
feet from, or 8 feet from the rim.
Yep. 615-737-1025, our phone number.
I tweeted out that story.
1025. Yeah. At the Ringer. It's a really good article there that kind of lays things out of where they're at. We've got a lot of different thoughts on this. Some people on the text line are all on board with this, saying they hate watching what's basically turned into a 3-point contest. We do have some others that are like, it's not really what the issue is with the NBA. It's more about like the sitting out and the load management and not playing. I get that too. Like, I think there's a lot with the NBA that they've got to find a way to address. And I think Adam Silver and the NBA are finally starting to recognize that what they're doing right now is not going to work long term. So I'm not saying that this is the biggest problem, but I do think this is playing a part in it of the games themselves, even though you may run across a game every now and then where, it's 149 to 146 because people are connecting on threes that night. When you have games that this article just laid out there that Goldsberry talks about, where you just got more missed 3-pointers than actual shots made in the game, that's a hard sell to watch and invest yourself in 48 minutes of that on a nightly basis if that's happening. Hard sell.
I mean, I'd flip the TV away if I was watching that, and certainly if you bought a ticket to that, that's
a tough one.
Tough one to walk home from.
615-737-1025, our phone number. We'll take more of your thoughts on that. Plus, PK has more to watch on the Titans front and a potential trade out of pick number 35 overall. We brought some of that up with Baumgartner a little bit earlier in the show. If you missed that, you can check it out wherever you get your podcast, Robby and Rexrode, Apple, Spotify. We'll have more coming with PK next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Final hour, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by First Horizon. Big bank muscle, small bank hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get-it-all. Robbie Stanley, Paul Kuharski, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. We'll be joined by Mike Herndon from paulkuharski.com later this hour at 8:30. So looking forward to that conversation with him. Right now, taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. So, PK, we've talked with you about the idea of trading back at number 35 with the Titans if you're looking to acquire more draft capital and potentially get back into the third round if you're trying to do that here in a couple weeks. And you came out with a piece, I think last week at paulkuharski.com about the idea of being at number one, picking Cam Ward, and maybe trying to pick up some more draft capital at 35, if that's the way you go then. You've now come out with another piece today at paulkuharski.com, which kind of walks people through what could potentially be there and what could potentially come about for the Titans if they're able to successfully pull off a trade and either move back into the third round or pick up more draft capital along the way here. So as you're going through this and you're putting this together and you're looking at what could be available for the Titans, what have you learned about what it may take for the Titans, or what it may take from another team to move up to trade with the Titans, and how do the Titans go about acquiring more draft capital, which is something that Chad Brinker basically from the start here has shown that he thinks it's really important that they're able to do that as they go through that process over the next couple of years here.
I think we all are thinking, they'd like to add here if they stay at number one and take Cam Ward. And then you look at some of the guys that they're having through on these 30 visits, Donovan Jackson, the Ohio State offensive lineman. Some people have projected in the first, I'm using James Foster's big board. He's writing at paulkuharski.com. I think he's got a good sense of people. His big board, varies. Charles Grant, the offensive tackle from William and Mary. They had these two guys in yesterday, Donovan Jackson and Charles Grant. You're thinking, well, two offensive linemen who are in that 35 range by themselves, and that's not a pressing need. They could be developed as guards for a year from now to play Zeitler's spot. They could be the swing tackle now behind Moore and Latham, but that's not a premium spot of need right now. They'd be depth guys right now. Washington State wide receiver Kyle Williams, 47th-ish. Isaiah Bond, the wide receiver from Texas, 58th. Femi Oladejo, the UCLA edge, 61-ish. Iowa running back Caleb Johnson, 79. I would die if they took a running back in that range. Terrence Ferguson, the tight end, that is very appealing guy. He's at 119. That's in range of their fourths if that stuck. But then in another article I wrote yesterday when I wrote about these guys visiting, Blake Bedingfield said, the numbers he has on guys are, his pure numbers, but he estimates they go a half a round or a round higher. His are value numbers, but because of the lack of talent out there, they go higher. So you look at these guys coming in and you say, well, if they're going to get these guys in the range that they're tabbed, and Foster's numbers line up to some degree with the big board compilations out there, you're thinking they're looking at a pick after 35. So that would lead you to believe in trades. There are 9 teams that have 2 third-rounders out there. Browns, Texans, Jaguars, Chiefs, thanks to the Titans.
Yep.
Rams, Saints, Giants, 49ers, Seahawks. Those are the teams you'd be looking for the Titans to make some kind of deal with to get in there. I looked at every trade made last year in involving second rounders. There were 7 trades in the second round. All of them included a swap of second rounders. all but one. So also I'm curious, like, there are all these different draft trade charts.
Yeah.
And the Jimmy Johnson chart seems outdated, the original chart. But all of these trades came with at least the 87.4% return for the loser, right? And there's only one that wasn't at least 90% return, So it seems like they're using the Jimmy Johnson chart to some degree.
Yep.
So I think the Titans can make moves there. I looked at two deals. You could send 35 to Seattle and get 50 in the second round and 82 in the third. And you'd win that by 4.8%.
Right.
That's not bad. You could ship 35 to San Francisco for 43 in the second round. You'd get 100 back in the third round, which is way at the end. And you'd win that by 3.6%. But you'd get 100, which is near the end of the third. That'd give you 100, 103, and 120.
So three in quick succession.
3 end of the third and 2 at the beginning of the fourth. And then I thought, it's interesting to look at teams with no fourth-round picks because the Titans have 2 fourth-round picks. So these teams might want to get into the fourth, and maybe you can manipulate a third to help them get into the fourth because they have long waits. So the Texans wait 77 spots. The Bears wait 76 spots. The Cowboys wait 73 spots. The Rams wait 61 spots from their because they're not in the fourth. So
right.
they're waiting from their third round pick until their fifth round pick. So maybe you could finagle a deal there. But if you look at this piece, it outlines all of these teams I think the Titans would be targeting if they're trying to get into the third.
Well, as it stands at the moment, you're picking 35 if you're the Titans, and then you're waiting around to 103. That's a long time to wait. It's a long time to wait with the needs that they've had. So in a perfect world, like I'd like for them to do this and to trade back and try to get back up into that third round and pick up some more players that way. Then the question becomes, and it was interesting because Nick Baumgardner brought up this name again earlier. Like, what do you do if you're the Titans and you're at 35 and Luther Burden is sitting there? Or, I mean, look, Mel Kiper just came out with a mock draft that had Emeka Egbuka sitting there at number 35 available for the Titans. That would be hard for me to pass up on. What if you look at an edge rusher and you just love whoever's available at edge rusher at 35? Like there's a balance, and the Titans are going to have a plan for this heading into the draft of if such and such is there, we'll take him. If not, we'll try to trade back. But what if guys are there that you really love at pick number 35? Well, then you take them and you're sitting there, you're waiting a long time to pick again. If I love the player, then I'm okay with that. Like I would rather have players rather than the number of players, which I know they need. I'd rather have quality of players that you feel good about. I'll take that every time. And then eventually I think you're going to be better off for that. But that's still a long way to wait from pick 35 to pick 103 if you're the Titans in this roster right now.
Yeah. And maybe you could do something. You got 2/4, 2/5 to come up, but then you're giving up numbers. You're giving up volume. And
yep.
I think, it was a big thing for John Robinson, certainly, to come out with the same number of picks
yep.
in his deals. So, Borgonzi said, told me at the owners' meetings, how far can you actually move back at 35 where there's a cost for a player where you can at least get one of them if you move back 5 spots, maybe it's 10 spots. As we get closer to the draft, you start to go horizontal across the board and start to work that strategy in terms of can we move back and possibly get this player? Is there a cluster of players that we could at least get one of them if we move back?
Right.
So they're looking, if we go from 35 to 45, at 45, can we go horizontally and see some people on that line that, one of those guys will be there. But, maybe there's value at 35 they can't pass up, and maybe they're just going to have to suck it up and not have more than 2 players in the top 100, despite how much they'd like to,
And
the lessons learned out of the trade, and they go forward trying to stockpile those picks.
And then you need those 2 players to hit really, 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 really well.
And you need L'Jarius Sneed to
sure.
play really, really well. And you can look at that and say, there's our 3rd rounder, and let's remember that.
Let's head back to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Adam in Portland. Adam, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, Robby. So if I agree. If you take Cam, it's almost mandatory you have to trade back to get him help. But let me ask you this: so if you draft him, do you 100% have to play him if you're the Titans? That's
based on where their quarterback room is right now. I would say yes.
I don't think unless he really shows you he's not ready, there's anything to be gained by watching rather than playing.
I just think, dude, like the growth stunt process, and this is a conversation for another day, I guess, but the more I have to hear you guys talk about, we're going to get all these players for him at 35, you can do this and that. I'm like, dude, I think he could be playing with an all-star roster and still have a chance to be stunning like Anthony Richardson. Look at Jordan Love, man. Nobody knew what was going to come out of him, but those developmental years were so important for him. Same thing for Patrick Mahomes. Like all these good quarterbacks, I feel like there's a pattern to it, man. I worry, even if you get him stockpiling picks, that you're going to end up with the same problem, man. That's what I worry about as a Titan.
Joe Burrow started with a very bad roster. Troy Aikman started with a horrific roster. Josh Allen started and struggled for a couple of years. It's the path of most quarterbacks. Don't look at Patrick Mahomes and Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers as the path. That's a very rare path.
Well, and again,
most guys get in there, take their bumps and bruises. Some of them get pulled then to kind of, all right, we're going to give them a couple weeks to reset, heal up, get a different perspective, and then they wind up back in after 3 weeks or whatever. But the normal course is you get in there.
Well, again, I think there's a difference, too, between a guy like Richardson and a guy like Ward. Richardson is more athletically gifted than Ward is, but Richardson also barely played college football. Like, he had basically 1 year at Florida, which was a very mixed bag, by the way. And I remember screaming on this show about how the Colts need to make sure that he sits because he's not ready to play, and then they didn't do it, and they basically ruined him at this point. I don't know if he's going to be good to begin with, but now they're talking about Daniel Jones being their starting quarterback. Like, I think Ward, with the amount of college football he's played, may come in and be ready to go. Like, C.J. Stroud was clearly ready to play.
Yeah, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, those guys are the guys that Callahan was kind of referring to when he said you could see the progression from Incarnate Word to Washington State to Miami, where he really took off and showed progress in the 2 categories that are the concerning categories of decision-making and accuracy.
Yeah.
And I don't know that decision-making and accuracy were Penix and Nix's concerns, but when you play 5 years, I mean, Nix and Penix were in college a long time like Ward was. It makes you way more ready than Anthony Richardson, who played, 17 college games?
I don't even know if he played that.
Yeah, I mean they're way different ends of the spectrum.
615-737-1025, our phone number. We'll have more coming with PK next on the NFL draft. We'll get to Mike Herndon coming up at 8:30. All that ahead. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Tune into Sports Talk 8:30 tonight as the Nashville Sounds take on Memphis. Pregame at 6:20, first pitch at 6:35. Coverage also available at the Game Nashville app and at theGameNashville.com. Sounds Baseball on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks and Family Leisure. Also, Vanderbilt baseball later tonight on 102.5 The Game. They're taking on Oklahoma. Pregame at 6:45, first pitch at 7 o'clock. Coverage also available on the Game Nashville app and at theGameNashville.com. Mike Herndon will be with us here in about 10 minutes. Coming up at 8:30, we're taking your thoughts on the Titans. Robert says, Levis played a ton of football also, and how'd that work out? He needs to sit and learn. What we've been doing hasn't worked. I believe the organization ruined Marcus and probably Levis at this point. Let's not do that to Cam. PK, my question is, who is he sitting
the
behind?
Organization ruined Marcus. What has Marcus done since he left the organization?
Marcus was
Marcus
here 5 years,
hurt.
guys. Yeah.
I mean, the organization ruined Marcus. This Marcus worship is silly. He needs to sit and learn. I mean, they've rebuilt the offensive line. It's going to be better. Their plan, not mine. I'm a skeptic until I see it. Offensive line, better. They're going to draft a weapon here. So they should be, have two solid receivers in Ridley and this new guy. Skeptical of what they'll have beyond that. They're going to get a tight end here that should go to the head of the line. And the defense, should be healthier and improved. They've upgraded the inside linebacker. And they're going to get an edge. They should have better personnel. But this idea that everything needs to be perfect in order for a quarterback to come in and go, that's not how the league works. It's not how the league works. Bo Nix didn't come in and sit. Jaden Daniels didn't come in and sit. Was Jaden Daniels surrounded by phenomenal people? Jaden Daniels is surrounded by a lot of one-year contract guys, by a team that was crappy.
Well, here's the other thing. The example that Adam in Portland brought up was Jordan Love sitting in Green Bay.
And Green Bay's a complete exception.
They've got
this 3-year sitting plan that kind of happened by accident this time.
Exactly. But it's also like, okay, so when Jordan Love was sitting, he had Aaron Rodgers in front of him. When Patrick Mahomes was sitting, now granted, Alex Smith is not Aaron Rodgers, but Alex Smith was a good NFL quarterback. Who do the Titans have right now for Cam Ward to quote unquote learn behind? Levis?
And they could have gotten somebody better.
Right.
And they didn't.
Exactly. So it kind of tells you, like, if they draft Cam Ward's going to start from the beginning, and he should start from the beginning. Like, I understand that in a perfect world, maybe you do go back to like the old ways and you sit every quarterback and, by year 2 or 3, they're ready to go. By and large, that just doesn't happen anymore.
Steve McNair and Carson Palmer were kind of the end of
Exactly.
that.
Yeah, exactly. And only we're going back at this point. So again, sometimes when these quarterbacks sit, it's also because they have the luxury to sit because there's a high level starting quarterback in front of them. The Titans do not have
those
one
are
of
good
right
teams
now.
that are planning. This is not a good team that's been able to plan. This is a team that's failed at quarterback. Outside of making a very favorable trade for Ryan Tannehill and largely maximizing him.
Yeah. Got one texter that says them ruining Marcus is at least arguable. Them ruining Levis is an absurd statement. I don't think them ruining Marcus is arguable either. Like, Marcus was not good enough. I don't know why we can't just say that. Like, yes, were the circumstances around him fantastic? Of course not. But Marcus at this point has been in the league for a decade and has never shown anything other than his second year as starting quarterback here with the Titans that would lead you to believe that he's anything more than a backup quarterback.
I mean, for those of you that think Marcus was somehow failed by the organization, I'm not saying the organization did great work with him, but are you looking for another quarterback with the Aloha spirit as kind of his MO? Did you find that to be a great motivating force for the offense?
Vrabel clearly didn't like it. I mean, Vrabel clearly wanted him to be.
You said it on the record.
Well, and so did DeMarco Murray and Eric Decker and other guys they played with. That the leadership part of it, from the vocal part of what you want from your quarterback, also wasn't there. And that's beyond just the physical stuff, which was not good enough on a consistent basis. So, again, I don't buy into the organization ruining Marcus Mariota. He's also here for 5 years. He had plenty of chances. Didn't get it done.
Plenty of chances. And he went into that last year and said, I said flat out, last chance to make your bid to be the long-term guy here. What are you changing in your approach? And he said, nothing.
Yeah.
I'm going with what got me into this situation. And that is really professional, diligent, thoughtful approach.
Yep. So back to our 102.5 The Game phone line. Welcome in Bob real quickly to the program. Bob, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, morning, guys. This conversation about whether you sit Cam or anything, and everybody's talking about Patrick Mahomes and everything. Yeah, Mahomes didn't play right away. Love didn't play right away. One of the difference someone's bringing up is they weren't the number one pick.
Yeah.
Maybe they go in the first round, but they weren't the first pick. And also, like you said earlier, they already had somewhat of an established team with them, with Packers having Rodgers and some of these other teams, but they weren't the number overall. Now, if we were 32nd and we picked him first, maybe he'd sit and learn. But when you're picking him number one in the draft, he's going to play.
Yep.
Correct.
Thanks for the call,
Good
Bob.
call.
Well, and I think, Jared Goff got drafted number one by the Rams, and I think he sat briefly.
And they traded up.
Yeah.
They weren't the worst team in the league.
Right. Like he sat, I'm looking at it, he played 7 games his rookie year. So he sat down for a little bit, and then eventually he was in. But by and large, he's right. If you're the number one pick, you're playing in the NFL. So 615-737-1025, our phone number. Mike Herndon will be with us from paulkuharski.com. Coming up next, we'll get his thoughts on all things Titans. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Paul Kuharski with me here on the program, talking Titans, and to help us do that, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in our friend Mike Herndon to the program from PaulKuharski.com. Mike, good morning. How are you?
Doing great, guys. How are y'all?
Doing awesome, man. Appreciate you taking time to be with us. So, Mike, I want to ask you about, everybody, I think at this point believes that Cam Ward is going to be the quarterback here for the Titans. So how do you view, I guess, that decision? Have you come around on Cam Ward? I know we talked earlier this offseason and you thought that's the way the Titans may go here, but now that it looks like that's the way they're going, how do you view that pick if that's what they make here on April the 24th?
Yeah, it took me a little bit to warm up to Cam Ward. But I think I have reached a point just with all of the information available to us that I think he's a dart worth throwing. Look, is he a sure thing? No. How many sure thing quarterbacks actually come through the draft process? Maybe once in 10 years, So I don't think that means you stop throwing darts until you get a 100% sure thing. But you've got to find those opportunities where a guy, presents the right skill set, talent, demeanor, production, checks kind of enough boxes that you feel like, okay, we can work with this. And he does have the upside to me just because of his physical skill set that you could close your eyes and envision 5 years down the road, Cam Ward is a, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, not that he's similar stylistically to those players necessarily, but that he's that level of quarterback in the NFL, that he puts it all together and is able to make it happen. You certainly could envision that potential scenario with his physical skill set. So I think he's worth taking a swing at. Certainly it makes it more exciting, to watch this team in 2025 if that does turn out to be the case. And I'm on board. I think he's certainly an interesting and intriguing quarterback to me.
We've been talking about Baker Mayfield as a line. Do we or don't we think he can be what Baker Mayfield has become? Obviously, you'd want him on a better track. Though Baker Mayfield's first couple of years weren't bad, then he tailed off, but was with an even more dysfunctional organization than this one. Do you think that's a fair comparison? Would you take Baker Mayfield as he's turned out at number one in a draft?
It's like right on the line. So I think that's probably a good marker, honestly, because I do think obviously you'd like to have somebody in that top 10 kind of MVP caliber conversation if you're taking a quarterback at one. But, Baker Mayfield is proven himself to be a guy that can get you into the playoffs, who can win games for you. So I don't know. I think you'd be a little disappointed if he turns out to be Baker Mayfield, but if you were, saying that's what you're going to get, setting aside the whole, Baker leaving Cleveland and whatnot conversation or part of that storyline, if you got 5 years of what Baker Mayfield basically started as and has eventually come back to being at a, cost control rookie salary, that's certainly a value, even if that's not ultimately what you want your first round, top overall pick to be.
You've been looking at some edge. I know you've been looking at everything. You and I talked a little bit about some edge rushers you've been looking at. Landon Jackson of Arkansas, one of them. Lance Zierlein said he's kind of got some unorthodox movements to him. What do you think of him, and where might you see him for the Titans?
Yeah, so Landon Jackson's one of my favorite options for the Titans at either 35 or after a small trade back in that top part of the second round. To me, and I get the production, but it doesn't jump off the page, and he does have a little bit of an unorthodox nature to him. But the thing that I always come back to with edge rushers, especially if you're looking for superstar potential, kind of guys that are going to get you 10 sacks a year, right? And that's what everyone wants. You cannot find guys that do that are not freak athletes. And Landon Jackson is a freak athlete. He's 6'6". He's got incredible length. I think he's got 35-plus-inch arms. And then he ran, I think it was in the 4.5s at the combine at 265 pounds. I mean, this guy is a freak athlete. I've heard everything about him character-wise is like top of the charts as well. So to me, if you're going to take a swing at one of these edge rushers in that high second round range, the guys that are expected to be there, I think Landon Jackson's the one I want. I just think if you're trying to get a guy that maybe has a level that he hasn't technically produced at just yet, that he can get to, that would put him in that superstar class, I think he's the guy in this class that's got that additional juice that you could see him being a kind of top of the line edge rusher at the next level.
You had two other edges. I suspect they fit this same category, and I hope you're going to write your annual piece for me about guys you love, which I know is maybe your favorite piece that you've written every year. Ashton Gelati from Louisville, seems his big question is maybe how he stands up against the run.
Yeah, and he's an intriguing guy to me. So Nick Scorton is a guy that a lot of people have pegged kind of in that 35-ish range that could be an option for the Titans there. But if the Titans wanted to wait a little bit, to me, Ashton Gelati is a lot like Nick Scorton. But you can probably get him at the end of the third or maybe into the fourth round just because, he doesn't come from quite as high a profile. He's not coming from the SEC, right? So Ashton Gelati he's kind of a sawed off, shorter edge. I think he's in the 6'2", 6'3" range height wise, but he's a power player. And that's honestly the thing that I love about a lot of this draft class, and that applies to Landon Jackson as well. These are not, 240, 245 pound edge rushers that can get, kind of pushed around. These are some power guys. And Gelati, I think, definitely fits that mold. He plays with his hair on the fire. I don't think he's ever going to necessarily be a top of the line edge rusher in the NFL. But if you're looking for a guy who's kind of in the Draymond Jones, mold, who, maybe that's a little bit of a hint as far as where they might be going skill set wise, given that signing and their apparent intention to play him on the edge. I think a lot fits and checks a lot of those boxes and is a guy that I'd be very interested in those middle rounds.
Mike Herndon, our guest. JT Tuimoloau is your third one, the Ohio State edge. He's got a 9.33 RAS, but he's got no 40 time, no running numbers in that.
Yeah, and yeah, he's been kind of selective about that. Now, I'll give him a little bit of grace because of the fact that their season ended so late. And obviously, I think their season ended, a week before the combine, basically. So I understand him maybe not running and not having had time to train, like a lot of these other guys did who had, a month off or 2 months off before the combine, basically. I don't think JT Tuimoloau is a explosive, super high-end athlete like Landon Jackson. He is close. I don't think he's quite to the Landon Jackson range, but his production and his polish as a pass rusher are far advanced of Landon Jackson. So he's kind of the other guy, and he's also got length. He's a bigger guy. He's got good length, 34-inch plus arms, and he's in the 260 plus range weight wise. I think he'd be a really nice pickup for them. Again, he's kind of my 1B to Landon Jackson's 1A among that edge rush class that's likely to be there in the top to middle of the second round.
Well, Mike, really good stuff, man. Really appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning, and we will talk to you soon, my friend.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Mike.
Absolutely. Mike Herndon from paulkuharski.com, our guest here on the program. We'll react to what Mike had to say there. Got more of your thoughts to get to on the text line. Still a lot of yelling about the Baker Mayfield comp on the text line. We'll get into that.
Caught fire with that.
Coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in. Final segment of the day. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Paul Kuharski with us here on the program. Got some tickets to give away to see Pierce the Veil at the Nashville Municipal Auditorium on Wednesday, June 4th. Be caller 3-615-737-1025. Caller number 3 will win tickets to see Pierce the Veil at the Nashville Municipal Auditorium on Wednesday, June the 4th. PK, some news potentially on the Titans front. So apparently George Fant did a piece and helped out Joe Person from theathletic.com that was centered around Colin Granger, who is a former college basketball player that is trying to make a transition to being a football player. And, of course, George Fant played basketball at Western Kentucky and then transitioned to playing in the NFL. So he's trying to make sure, moving forward that he can help other basketball players kind of make that switch over to the NFL. Well, in the meantime, during this piece, he also pointed out that he's trying to keep his own playing career going, the offensive tackle, who we talked about with the Titans a couple of years ago. Well, apparently we could be talking about him again. Fant told, I believe, Person in this interview, quote, "There's a couple other teams that I've been talking to, but those two are intriguing," referring to the Baltimore Ravens and the Tennessee Titans. Says obviously Baltimore being a contender and Nashville being where I live at. So I'm definitely interested. So apparently George Fant visiting with the Ravens and the Titans coming up. Your thoughts on that?
So he was a possibility in 2023 as opposed to Andre Dillard, correct?
I believe that is correct.
Love it in 2023 as opposed to Andre Dillard. Love it. Now,
didn't he end up in Houston that year too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he was outbid. They were outbid for him. Was it 2023 was Dillard? Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
What a year it was.
Yeah. I mean, sure. All the depth they can get, pile on the veteran depth, pile on the draft depth, the more, the merrier. Be ready for catastrophic injury. Be ready for absolutely anything. But to me, would have loved him in 2023.
Yeah. It's interesting that they're taking a look at another offensive line piece there. Like, we'll see how the draft breaks out. But before free agency, we would all agree that tackle is specifically a spot where they've got to really hone in on. And now it's not as much of a need. You brought up a couple of interesting players that could be there, be that at guard or at tackle, if they decide to move back and pick up more picks in the second and third rounds. I look at this right now and say, the more I watch this, if you're going Cam Ward at number 1, then you really need to pick up as much help in the draft at wide receiver and edge rusher as you can get. And you may just have to continue to patch it together on the offensive line until that point. So we know, Moore's going to be the starter at left tackle, Latham at right tackle. Could Fant come in and give you a reliable swing guy? I guess that'd be at age 32, what you'd have to discover there if you're him. Now,
it was Fant and Hubbard, right? So they were bidding on Fant, and Fant wanted more.
That's correct. So he played 16 games that year for Houston, and last year he only played 2. So he played 2 and then got hurt in Seattle. So you're coming off an injury-plagued season where he's an 8-year veteran at this point. He'll be 32 years old. He'll be 33 at some point next year when the season's going on. So how much does he still have left in the tank? I don't know. But again, like if you're bringing him in, he's not starting for you. He's going to be, I would assume, a swing tackle at that point. So what would you actually need him to do?
So it wasn't Dillard. It was Hubbard.
Hubbard on the right side.
They were
so
choosing
there.
between. They
Hubbard
were choosing between. Hubbard and Fant.
Yeah.
And that was the NPF was suspended at the beginning of that season. So that's what it was. NPF was suspended at the beginning of the season. Fant wanted the full season ride, right? And they weren't promising him that he would keep the job when NPF came back.
Which is amazing in retrospect to look back on.
Yeah.
That's how that was handled. Yeah. We'll see what ends up happening on that front. I think the way he laid it out there is interesting. Yeah, Baltimore's a contender, and Nashville, I live there, so I'd be interested in that. So
who does not live here?
That's a good question. I mean, you could form a pretty good team.
I mean, if we could just
players that live here.
With players who live here who are not on the Titans, you could form a pretty good team that to take on the Titans.
You could. I mean, Rodgers got a property here. I don't know if he's ever here.
We don't know. When is he going to build on the property?
I don't know. I don't know if maybe he's already started. I have no idea.
Still Billy has a line into this. Still Billy, get us the plans and the data. Like he's just dropped that story.
Yes, he poured concrete.
He broke that he had property and he thought that was a huge deal. It's turned into nothing. Give us when are they laying the cornerstone?
Has the house been framed yet?
Yeah. What do we have? Are the architectural plans finalized or not?
PK, people still yelling about Baker Mayfield. I think we found a nice bar here. There's strong opinions on both sides of the would you take Cam Ward at number 1 if you knew he turned out to be last year's version of Baker Mayfield. I think the answer is pretty clearly yes, but there are Titans fans that vehemently disagree with that.
Yeah, I think you're spoiled if you want that. And to revisit something we said earlier, I think you're being way provincial if you want if you're upset about Taylor Zarzour as the new play-by-play guy. Oh, I just wish it was somebody from here who was relatable. So you rate that over goodness. If there's not a local candidate, I mean, I'm sure they would have loved the local candidate. The local candidates don't have the kind of experience that they want. Taylor Zarzour is good. And, just give a guy a chance. Like, why limit the pool of candidates to local?
That's a good question. PK?
That's it. The National Football League. It's not the Nashville Football League.
PK, thank you for being with us. You'll be back tomorrow.
I believe I will, in fact, be back tomorrow. Don't block the box. Be sure to lock your locks.
That does it for us today. Chase and Big Joe's coming up next. You're listening to 102.5.